Tragically, on January 13, 1972, 9-year-old Debbie Lynn Randall, a young third grader in Marietta, Georgia, vanished on her way home from a nearby laundromat. Her disappearance sparked a massive upsurge that involved thousands of people, but it ended in sadness. Debbie's body was found 16 days later, on January 29, 1972, and it was discovered that she had been tragically attacked and strangled. After decades of being unsolved, this case saw a breakthrough in 2023. With a population of almost 61,000, Marietta, Georgia, is a significant city in Cobb County and a part of the Atlanta metropolitan area. Its roots are deeply ingrained in history, dating back to the early settlers in the area that is now Kennesaw, the Cherokee town of Big Shanty. The historic Marietta Square, located in the center of the city, is a symbol of its illustrious past. Marietta, well known for its monumental chicken structure, a landmark since 1963, combines old-world charm with contemporary suburban living. It is ideally situated between Kennesaw and Smyrna, and major routes like Interstate 75, State Route 3, and U.S. Route 41 provide good access to it. Despite its many positive features, the city is not immune to crime, as evidenced by the recent resolution of the Debbie Lynn Randall cold case in 2023. John Randall and Juanita Wheeler Randall were delighted to welcome Debbie Lynn Randall into the world on August 21, 1962, in the sleepy Georgian town of Marietta. Debbie was a third grader at Pine Forest Elementary School when she was a child in the year 1972. Her kind and compassionate disposition soon won her over as a favorite among her peers, both at school and in the neighborhood. Debbie was adored and renowned for her kind disposition. Debbie had a charming personality, as evidenced by the warmth and love that were frequently present in her home. Guests showed their affection for her by bringing dolls for her on a regular basis. These dolls represented the affection of the community for her and were more than just toys. Debbie had a unique relationship with her elder brother Melvin Randall at home. Their bond as siblings was close-knit and compassionate. As Debbie's caring and protective older brother, Melvin always makes an effort to grant her wishes. Their family's close-knit dynamics were demonstrated by this bond. Debbie's life, which was filled with hopes and youthful aspirations, was tragically cut short, leaving her family and community grieving greatly. On January 13, 1972, the Randall family in Marietta seemed to be enjoying just another evening. Debbie, a lively little child, was with her mother Juanita, and her brother Melvin was in bed because he was sick. Juanita was in the kitchen making dinner while she waited for John, Debbie's father, to return. The evening went on as usual. Debbie asked permission to play at the neighborhood playground that evening, as she usually did. It is a short walk from their house and a known and secure area. Debbie happily agreed, promising to return before supper, when Juanita asked her to pick up some washing powder from the laundromat across the street. Debbie's regular routine included a 5-minute stroll to the playground, where she would typically spend an hour playing after school. In roughly 1.5 hours, Juanita anticipated her return. But as time went on and Debbie did not come back, anxiety began to grow. Debbie never missed her curfew, and she never arrived late without telling her. Juanita's anxiety increased as the evening went on and Debbie was still nowhere to be found. Around 9:45 p.m., John arrived home, but they still did not know Debbie's whereabouts. When they realized that this was not at all like Debbie, their concern turned to panic. Melvin joined the search even though he was not feeling well. The family acted quickly. Normally the center of activity, the neighborhood was now the focus of an increasing amount of concern. Melvin went around asking people if they had seen Debbie, but nobody knew anything about her other than the fact that she had left the house earlier. Juanita and John hurried to the closed laundromat after discovering the playground was empty. The streets were deserted, and the loss of their daughter made each minute feel more burdensome. Their concerns were heightened when they found a box of washing powder on the road close to their house. A stark reminder that something was wrong. Refusing to cry and motivated by maternal instinct, Juanita made the decision to call the police. Nevertheless, they had to deal with the formal obstacle that Debbie had vanished in less than 24 hours, which prevented them from filing an official missing persons report at that time. The police reassured them that they would make every effort to find Debbie in spite of this. The Randall family received support and assistance in their search from the community as a whole. Approximately 4,000 volunteers, among them Debbie's brother Melvin, canvassed the city in the days that followed. The streets were covered in flyers with Debbie's picture on them and a request for her safe return. The local police were equally dedicated and followed up on every lead. Debbie had picked up the washing powder, as the laundromat confirmed, but it was still unclear what transpired in the short time between her visit and her disappearance. Although Debbie's immediate neighborhood friends were questioned during the search, none of them were able to provide information about her whereabouts. The Randall family and the community held on to hope as the days stretched into weeks, knowing that it would soon run out. On January 29, 1972, 16 agonizing days later, a group of Southern Tech students who had been assiduously helping the police made an extremely painful discovery. Debbie's body was discovered off Johnson Ferry Road in a wooded area. It was a grim scene, with her half-clothed body showing signs of a violent struggle, as though she had battled mightily to survive. It appeared that the murderer had muffled Debbie's screams for assistance with her own coat. The revelation provided a horrifying glimpse into the suffering Debbie had to go through. It seemed as though the offender had been pursuing her and waiting for the right opportunity to kidnap her. This vicious person made Debbie endure horrific experiences in multiple places before disposing of her body in the woods. The community, once unified in resolve and hope, was now brought together in grief. Marietta was rocked by shock when word of the tragic discovery of Debbie's body reached the community. The sight of their dead daughter's body struck Joanna and John Randall like a ton of bricks, turning their terrible nightmare into a terrible reality. Everyone who knew Debbie will always bear a profound wound from her passing. Debbie was a cherished daughter, sister, and friend. As the Randall family struggled to understand the terrible fate that had befallen little Debbie, the community grieved with them. The inquiry into Debbie Lynn Randall's death grew more intense after her body was tragically found. Examining the scene, the coroner found disturbing details. Debbie was severely injured, as evidenced by the deep wounds on her body from being strangled and beaten. During this examination, a crucial finding was an unidentified hair strand that might have belonged to her attacker. This discovery suggested a potential development in the case. But one major obstacle in the 1970s was the limitations of medical technology. Since such evidence analysis was still in its infancy, the hair sample offered more of a hope for the future than a quick fix. The hair was preserved with great care, hoping that one day new technological developments would help identify Debbie's killer. Detectives followed hundreds of leads over the course of days and months, all of which ended in dead ends despite the lead's initial promise. Law enforcement put in a lot of effort, but they were caught in a frustrating loop and could not find the key clues that would have solved the case. The Randall family was left with unanswered questions as a result of the protracted uncertainty and lack of closure. They wondered what had really happened that fateful evening and who was to blame for their daughter's premature death. They had to deal with the pain of losing their dear Debbie as well as the never-ending annoyance that justice was still evasive. Debbie's case progressively moved from an active investigation to a cold case as the years went by and the number of leads decreased. Her murder mystery remained unsolved for almost 28 years, causing constant suffering and intrigue. The Marietta community and the Randall family were left to ponder whether the truth about Debbie's terrible demise would ever be revealed. The case, which left many who knew and loved Debbie with unsolved questions and unfulfilled justice, lingered in their collective memories. But in 2001, there was a renewed interest in the unsolved mystery surrounding Debbie Lynn Randall's case. Re-examining old files, Detective Morris Nix was unable to escape the haunting memory of unsolved cases. That included Debbie's case, where he sensed details that the 1972 original investigation had overlooked. Detective Morris reopened the case because he was determined to find answers. He found the long-stowed evidence box and the hair strand that had been preserved from the crime scene. The case was put on hold while future technological advancements were made because, despite the FBI's best efforts, the hair's owner could not be identified using the advanced technology of the early 2000s. Until 2015, when Detective Morris joined the Cobb County Cold Case Unit, the case remained unresolved. The case took on new life and increased momentum thanks to modern medical science. Sandra Walker was one of the children who played with Debbie that fateful evening, and media coverage helped bring her to light. Sandra's testimony, which had previously been suppressed out of fear, gave the case a terrifying new angle. Years later, the horrific details of her experience seeing Debbie kidnapped were still fresh in her mind. Police partnered with Amanda Wood, a freelance artist and a graphic designer, to engage the community in job memories. Wood devoted months to putting Debbie's final moments into graphic form. The result is a moving and intense depiction that highlights both Debbie's innocence and the horrific nature of her attack. Debbie's father, John, held on to every article from the newspaper detailing his daughter's disappearance, a continual reminder of the mystery left unsolved. Detective Morris, in the meantime, sent a piece of cloth with floral prints found on Debbie's body to the Sorensen Forensic Lab so that it could be tested for DNA. Thanks to technological developments, a partial DNA profile of an unidentified man could be created. Despite obstacles, renewed DNA testing provided fresh opportunities for the investigation in 2019 thanks to additional funding from the Criminal Justice Coordination Council. Previously unmoving, the case now might lead to the answers the Randall family and the Marietta community have been looking for many years. Thanks to developments in genetic genealogy, Debbie Lynn Randall's cold case made a significant breakthrough in 2023. The police set out to create an SNP, a single nucleotide polymorphism profile, in cooperation with DNA Labs International. This was due to the fact that preliminary efforts, such as evidence analysis and searches in the Combined DNA Indexing System, or CODIS, did not yield any results. Compared to conventional techniques, this SNP profile offers a more thorough and insightful kind of genetic profiling. It required a painstaking process of looking through police files and public records. Their objective was to locate a DNA match for a person connected to the case. After finding a match, the detectives got to work creating an intricate family tree. They tried to track down as many of the suspected attacker's relatives as they could, a move that showed how police work and community involvement are always changing. The relatives of the named suspect were contacted by the police. Surprisingly, the family members cooperated and voluntarily gave samples of their DNA for analysis. This was a critical point in the investigation that demonstrated the ability of community collaboration to solve enduring mysteries. Following all required testing, there was a clear match between the DNA evidence taken from the crime scene. The killer was identified as William B. Rose, a resident of Mabelton, Georgia. For the Randall family and the Marietta community, who had been waiting more than 50 years for answers, this revelation was a watershed moment. Born in 1950, William B. Rose is still somewhat of a mystery because so little is known about his upbringing, parents, and career. When he kidnapped and murdered Debbie Randall at the age of 22, his life took a tragic turn. In 2023, authorities searched for Rose in an attempt to capture him, but in an unexpected turn of events, they discovered something they had not anticipated. Rose committed suicide in 1974, 2 years after his horrific murder of Debbie, because he was obsessed with avoiding being apprehended by the authorities. Even at the time of a prior arrest for an incident involving alcohol, this fear was apparent. Rose never made an appearance on the police radar during the first investigation, so it was shocking to learn that he was Debbie's killer. Given that Rose and Debbie's family shared an apartment building, it is possible that Rose saw Debbie at the neighborhood playground, where he was laying the groundwork for his evil scheme. When the police exhumed Rose's body in 2023 to establish his identity as the culprit, tests unequivocally identified him as the one who had tragically taken Debbie Randall's life. Debbie Lynn Randall's long-running case came to a bittersweet conclusion with the identification of William B. Rose as the culprit. Sadly, Juanita and John Randall, Debbie's parents, died before this information was found. After a fight with leukemia, Juanita passed away in 2018 and John in 2022. They had to bear the grief of losing Debbie at such a young age for decades. Debbie's brother, Melvin, conveyed his relief and appreciation. Morris Nix, a retired detective, said that technology was vital to the case's resolution. Suitland is an incorporated census-designated place in Prince George County, Maryland, in the United States. Suitland is a wonderful area to raise a family because of its tranquility and urban-suburban mixed feel. The liberal citizens of Suitland frequently spend their weekends in the town's well-known parks. Suitland is a beautiful place, but in contrast, the crime rate is much higher than the average for all American communities, regardless of its size. Sadly, a horrible crime occurred in Suitland in 1979 when a young mother was kidnapped and brutally murdered, leaving her devoted family behind. On March 20, 1951, Vicki Lynn Belk was born into the family of Lonnie and Maydell Belk. Vicki, the eldest of the 6 Belk siblings, was a devoted big sister to April, Grenda, Judy, and Kay, as well as her younger brother, Lonnie Jr., who goes by Ricky. Vicki grew up in Alexandria, Virginia, along with all of her siblings. Following their parents, Lonnie and Maydell's successful lawsuit against the Board of Education school desegregation ruling, Vicki and her sister Judy became the first African-American students to attend the Minnie Howard Elementary School in Alexandria, Virginia. Vicki later graduated from T.C. Williams High School in 1969. Vicki grew up during the Civil Rights Movement. The Belk family was a family that always stood by their values and was prepared to defend the rights of their community and family. The Belk family persisted in being role models for everyone in their community and for one another, even after suffering violence and losing a few fights. Like her family, Vicki also took a strong interest in speaking out and defending her neighborhood. Vicki's thoughtful and giving nature made her a role model for her siblings. Vicki became the first person in her family to graduate from college during a period when she and her community were rarely given opportunities. In 1974, Vicki graduated from St. Augustine College in Raleigh, North Carolina, with a Bachelor of Arts in Education. Her diligence and proficiency in her chosen field paid off, as she was hired as a management analyst in the Department of Agriculture's Office of Operations and Finance in Washington, D.C. Vicki, a 28-year-old woman, was juggling parenting her young son, Lyman Belk, and her job in Washington in 1979. She remained active in her community, working as a Sunday school teacher and church clerk at Oakland Baptist Church in Alexandria, which Vicki's great-grandfather, Wesley Casey, co-founded. Vicki's family maintained regular communication and was very close to one another. Vicki's entire family came together to celebrate Judy's marriage at the Oakland Baptist Church in early August 1979. Vicki went to the wedding with James Hill, her co-worker turned boyfriend. Vicki assisted with much of the event's planning and served as Judy's maid of honor. A few days after Judy's wedding, Vicki returned to her regular life with her boyfriend, James Hill, who worked for the Agriculture Department. Vicki and James got ready for the day on August 27, 1979, as they usually did. From their Prince George's County apartment, they took a ride in James' 1972 Buick to the Stadium Armory Station, where they parked the car and took the train to their offices. That day, Vicki had some errands to run and planned to finish them after lunch. She told James she would see him in the parking lot after work that evening. James arrived at the parking lot after finishing work and discovered that Vicki was nowhere to be found. The car was still gone. James waited until dusk and became concerned when Vicki was nowhere to be found. He tried calling some of Vicki's close friends and family members that evening to see if they had any information about her whereabouts, but nobody had any idea. James waited for Vicki for hours after getting home, but she never showed up. When James attempted to report his girlfriend Vicki missing to the Prince George's County Police Department early on August 28, 1979, the officials informed him that an official report could only be filed 72 hours after Vicki's disappearance because she was an adult. All James could do was wait and hope Vicki would come back. James informed Vicki's family of the news. They became very concerned, especially Maydell, Vicki's mother. She went crazy because she was unable to comprehend what was happening. It was unusual for Vicki to not check on her son, and it was not like her to not call or let her loved ones know where she was going. Now that her fearless daughter was gone, Maydell could only fear the worst. Vicki's family endured a very agonizing 72 hours of waiting, and as the day wore on, they realized something was seriously wrong. A local teenage boy discovered something strange in the woods on August 29, 1979, while out for a bike ride on Metropolitan Church Road, which is close to Route 227 in Maryland. Upon closer inspection, he discovered it was a dead body. After riding his bike home, he told his mother about the horrific discovery, and she contacted the police. When police arrived at the scene, they discovered a dead woman who was only partially clothed and had been shot in the head. After being taken to Baltimore's chief medical examiner, the woman's body was identified as Vicki Lynn Belk. Homicide was declared the cause of death. Vicki's parents, Maydell and Lonnie, received a call from the Charles County Sheriff's Office, informing them that they needed to come to the police department as they had some information about their daughter. On their way to the police station, Lonnie and Maydell were actually pretty upbeat. They believed that perhaps Vicki had just been injured and had since been located. But the most terrible news was delivered to Maydell and Lonnie when they got to the sheriff's office. Their oldest daughter, who was also their firstborn child, had been killed and abandoned by the side of the road. Maydell instantly started crying uncontrollably because she was in too much pain. She cursed the man who had done this to her daughter. Vicki's family was overcome with grief. They were severely traumatized by the violent and chaotic nature of the crime. After gathering themselves, they handed the case over to the detectives in the hopes that Vicki's killer would be apprehended and dealt with fairly. An inquiry into the killing got underway. The crime scene had already been secured, and detectives were continuously gathering evidence and looking for clues. Vicki's brown shoes, pantyhose, jewelry, bra, and slip-in dress were among the items the investigators found. They also found some hair samples and nail clippings. Despite being tested several times, the items discovered at the crime scene proved to be of little use to the investigators. Vicki's relatives, co-workers, and those in the vicinity of the crime scene were all questioned by the detectives during their numerous interviews. Nothing seemed to be happening with the investigation, not even after some leads were followed up on. Vicki had taken James's car to run errands the day before she vanished, and the detectives were still searching for it in the hopes that it would contain information that would help them find Vicki's killer. James's Buick was eventually discovered abandoned in Washington, D.C. within a few days. Unfortunately, though, the murderer's trail was completely erased. Despite the lack of fresh information in the case, the detectives were committed to identifying Vicki's killer. They kept all of the evidence in the hopes that it could be retested with more sophisticated technology. In an attempt to identify Vicki's killer and bring him to justice, Charles County detectives collaborated with the Maryland State Police, Bode Technology in Lorton, Virginia, and Sorensen's laboratories in Salt Lake City, Utah, over the course of the following few years as more and more cutting-edge technologies were being introduced. However, they were once again met with failure. The investigation into Vicki's assault and murder gradually came to a standstill as more time passed, and the identity of her killer remained a mystery. Vicki was killed in 1979, and at the time, DNA samples could not be tested due to lack of equipment or technology. The 1980s saw the birth of the technology as law enforcement began compiling a sizable database of fingerprints and DNA samples from suspects of crimes across the nation. When DNA testing became a little more sophisticated in the early 2000s, investigators in Vicki's case retested the evidence. When Vicki's dress was examined again, it turned out to have a foreign bodily fluid on it. This allowed the investigators to create a profile of a possible suspect. Nevertheless, there was still much room for improvement in testing technology, so the created profile was unfit to be added to any database or compared to any suspects. Years went by, and the investigators continued to use new technology to repeatedly test Vicki's possessions that they had discovered at the crime scene. When Vicki's slip and dress were retested using forensic technology in 2022, the detectives were able to create a DNA profile of a male whose bodily fluids were found on Vicki's dress. This gave law enforcement some hope that Vicki's murderer would be apprehended and imprisoned. The newly created male profile was compared to profiles in CODIS, the Combined DNA Index System. The forensic team meticulously examined several profiles before discovering a match in their database. The owner of this profile was Andrew Taylor, a 61-year-old man. When the results were communicated to the sheriff's office in November 2022, investigators made the decision to delve deeper into Andrew's past, including his criminal record. At the time, Andrew, who is now elderly, was residing in a Washington, D.C. nursing home and rehabilitation center. By monitoring him closely and persistently obtaining information about his background, the detectives discovered that Andrew had resided in his aunt's Charles County house at the time of Vicky's murder. Vicky's body was discovered less than 4 miles from the house, but this information wasn't enough to nab Andrew. To establish his role in the horrifying murder, the investigators still required more substantial evidence. To do this, investigators obtained a warrant for Andrew's arrest in March 2023 and entered the assisted living facility where he was staying. Detectives needed more proof, so they confronted Andrew and took a sample of his saliva to compare with the DNA from the crime scene again. The unexpected visit made Andrew aware that he was under suspicion for Vicky's murder, but given his current state of health, the detectives were not concerned that he would run out of town. Authorities knew he was staying put, even though the lab test would take weeks to complete and results would not be available. Andrew's health was rapidly deteriorating and he could hardly perform any activities due to his amputated leg. On June 16, 2023, the DNA match with Andrew's profile was confirmed once more. He was charged with first-degree murder and assault. On June 22, 2023, he was arrested and ordered held without bond. Vicky's family and the detectives who worked on her case addressed the media in a press conference. Vicky's family was inconsolable, living through the past as the investigation's findings evoked painful memories. Judy Belk remembered her late sister by sharing her favorite memory, while Vicky's son, Lamont Belk, thanked the police. Vicky's brother, Ricky Belk, described what happened to his mother after the tragic event. It is unclear at this time whether Andrew has entered a plea. He is being represented by the Maryland Public Defender Office, which declined to comment on the matter. Vicky was unfamiliar with Andrew, and his assault on her was unplanned. Andrew was just 18 when he committed the horrible act. Vicky was robbed of her opportunity to lead a fulfilling life. The people who loved her were deeply saddened by her death, but they also felt some relief and closure now that her killer was in prison. Vicky's son, Lamont Belk, joined Cobb County, Georgia's assistant director attorney after earning degrees from George Mason University School of Law and Morehouse College in 2009. Kay, Vicky's sister, is a retired surgeon from the Contra Costa County Sheriff's Office in California. The lone boy among numerous sisters, Lonnie, holds a lieutenant position in the Fairfax County Fire and Rescue Department. In 1980, following Vicky's untimely death, the Belk family established the Vicky Belk Scholarship Foundation to pay tribute to Vicky and offer scholarships in her name. The scholarship board's job is to help raise money for graduating seniors at Oakland Baptist Church in Alexandria, Virginia, the church where Vicky Lynn Belk was baptized, and to offer opportunities that carry on her legacy. Through the scholarship program, approximately 100 students from Oakland Baptist Church have received awards thus far. Vicky's family wants to perpetuate her passion for learning in Oakland Baptist Church youth.